You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 57 of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. Let's get real about self-motivation. Now, this is something different for me because normally I do a live broadcast, but I had to record this particular episode just because of how crazy my schedule's been. Because I told you, I'm still being committed to every single week doing an episode. So this is my first recorded episode that I'm doing. So we'll see how this all turns out. It's going to seem live though. So I'm going to make it seem like you're front, center, and present with me. So as I said, namaste. Welcome to another episode of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, the podcast that looks to embrace salient topics related to mental wellness from a fresh and forward-thinking perspective is how I like to think that I do this. The focus of the podcast, of course, is to pull back that veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage that we all feel victim to, but often how it plagues us and keeps us from identifying the ambitions and stops us from harnessing that motivation to help us yield the satisfaction that we seek in our daily lives. So, if you're a first-time viewer or listener, welcome. I always say buckle up for safety. Not that it's not a safe space, but occasionally it could get a little bumpy unexpectedly because maybe I'll say something within the podcast that really makes you think or reflect on something. So just kind of like make people aware of the whole point here is to do the work to kind of maybe make you a little uncomfortable because getting out your comfort zone is important to be able to get to that best version of yourself. And of course, if you are a returning listener or viewer, then pretty much you know the process of how we do things. Welcome back. As always, appreciate you being here with me. Make sure you have a pencil, pen, paper. Maybe you can jot down if you have this thought or something you want to reflect on. Grab your beverage of choice. For me, I'm hydrating, just doing some water today, but it's 5 o'clock someplace. So you know what? Whatever it is you're enjoying, as long as you're front, center, and taking this hour of time to focus on you, that's all that really matters. There's a number one rule I have here at M.A.Y.A. So my returning listeners and viewers know it. My newbies, here's what you got to know. The rule, the number one rule. With this podcast, you work at your own pace. There's 57 episodes. So I've covered a lot of ground in regards to mental wellness topics. And sometimes I kind of retread things I think they're worthy of maybe giving some more perspective on. But there's 57 whole episodes. And you might be back in episode 36 because that's the one where you're doing the work. It's okay. You don't have to be front and center every single time I go live. Don't get me wrong. I appreciate it. But it's important that you work at your own pace first and foremost. So as I say, get comfortable, find that place that you can listen, dig in, and commit 60 minutes to yourself. It's what it's all about. So if you want to join the conversation, you can still comment, even though this is a recorded podcast. Just place your comments on Facebook or YouTube. And you know what? Boom. When I rebroadcast it another time, your comments will be there. So you can always join the conversation. So I may say something that makes you go, you know something, I've had a similar experience, or here's my thought on this, M.A.Y.A. It's key. So you can always join the conversation. One of the things that's also important, rule number 2, which really could be rule number 1 at M.A.Y.A, is that this is not a therapy session. This is not advice. I am getting insight to mental wellness for you. And the thing about it is, if you hit that snag or something happens, the goal is that as your mental wellness advocate, maybe you'll say, maybe it is time I talk to someone. But nothing here I give you is advice. It's not therapy. You should not be making any decisions of loftiness based on something that I said. Go do the work with a therapist or a counselor. That's the whole point of me doing this podcast. Now, if you're saying 57 whole episodes, well, where can I catch the other 56 of them? You can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A.com. Remember, with every single episode, there's a podcast companion, which means I'm going to give some additional information that I think can add some breadth and depth to the conversation. So just go to M.A.Y.A.com, click on the podcast resource tab, and you can go ahead and listen to past episodes. Of course, by subscribing to my YouTube channel, you can always find episodes of M.A.Y.A. So just search M.A.Y.A on YouTube. You're going to scroll past a whole bunch of Japanese anime and boom, you're going to see my face there. Like, subscribe, and share. I always say, maybe this episode isn't enlightening for you, but you never know. You might have somebody that might gain some insight, or they really might get to thinking by a topic that I'm sharing. So it's always good to like, subscribe, and share M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, with people maybe you have on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that good stuff. Of course, remember, You can always get social with me. It's pretty straightforward. You can find me at Maya_Akai via Twitter and Instagram. Facebook is Maya Kai Presents is how you find me. So if you want to get social with me or like, subscribe, and to share, that's how you do it on social media. Lastly, about my podcast stuff. If you have a podcast platform of choice, I'm not going to hold it against you because that's how you like to listen to your podcast. You can pretty much find me just about everywhere. You can find me on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, so many different podcast platforms. Just make sure you search Maya, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and like, subscribe, and share. Hopefully that call to action is now ingrained in your brain. Like, subscribe, and share. Whether it's social media or my podcast platforms, just make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. All right. That is our housekeeping stuff for the show. Let's have our first toolbox moment of the show. So if you're a returning listener or viewer, you know there's always something we lead with on the show. One of the things that's really important is that by now, you know, one of the most important things that you put into your Maya toolbox. And part of the show is I want to give you resources so that you can use them to keep working on getting to that best version of yourself. So in this case, it would be emotional intelligence is one of the most important things that should be in your toolbox, that should be front and center from the minute you rise in the morning. You should take out your emotional intelligence. And before you go to bed at night and you put it away, you should reflect on it. So for my returning listeners and viewers, you know that pretty much emotional intelligence, also referred to as EI, is the ability to perceive, evaluate, and control your emotions. And as you grow and begin to understand yourself more, you will also begin to understand others. So emotional intelligence isn't one-sided. It's a two-way street. You understand your emotions and you grow and learn how others may feel or why they may be reacting to a situation because you up your emotional intelligence. Something else that's important, not just putting toolbox on the table, I pretty much found a quote that I thought would be the overarching theme of Maya for the entire 2021 year. Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, as says Aristotle, an old Greek philosopher. And to me, that's the essence of what Maya is all about. Getting to the best version of yourself means knowing yourself. And as you know yourself, things such as self-motivation makes a lot more sense and is a viable tool because you are in touch with the core of the being of who you are. So knowing yourself is a beginning of all wisdom. And if you're here and if you've been tuning into all these episodes, it has to be because you really want to do the work to get to the best version of yourself. I want to normalize the conversation about mental wellness. I realize it's not a sexy conversation. And usually most people don't want to dip their toe in the water until they get pushed in and they're neck deep, if not higher. Then their mental wellness matters, but they haven't done the work to really be prepared for when you get into deep waters. They don't know what to do. I want people to understand that mental wellness should be front and center, just like every other type of health concern or preventative measures that you take. Your mind is a terrible thing to waste. And that saying goes a lot deeper than people realize because your mind is what runs the rest of your body. So where your mind goes, the rest of your body will follow. So if your mind's not right, pretty much, guess what? The rest of your life, mind, body, soul, financially, physically, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, will be in disarray. Okay, so maybe I'm saying something you're like, okay, Maya, I hear you. Well, remember, you can always get involved with the show and more than just commenting on what I say, you can always send me a virtual letter. So say, for instance, I say something that really gets you thinking and you're like, you know something, Maya, you got me thinking, I'm reflecting and I'm in the situation I'm struggling to navigate. You know, what's your thoughts on this? Or you said this in this episode and that resonated with me for this reason. You were spot on. Thank you for kind of turning the light bulb on for me and making me realize, yeah, I need to do some emotional work to get into that better place so I can get to that best version of me, or I can achieve the happiness I seek in my life. And I always tell people, stop thinking of the best version of you and happiness in lofty terms. Think about them on an everyday measure because being the best version of you, as well as seeking happiness, is quantitative. Only by working on it daily. And that qualitative effort you put into it gives you the bigger picture. And a lot of people don't understand that's how the work should actually go. So if you're interested and you want to shoot me a letter, and I get a letter that sometimes I'll form a whole episode around, but other times I'll pick several letters and just do one episode and go into Maya's mailbag. Well, if you want to drop me a virtual letter, AKA an email, you can always email me at getinspired@mayaakai.com. Once again, if you'd like to join the conversation by sending me a virtual letter, AKA email, you can send that to getinspired@mayaakai.com. All right. That's our housekeeping stuff for the show. Let's get into episode 57. Let's get real about self motivation. And the reason I kind of wanted to revisit this and kind of give it a bit more depth, because I've kind of talked about it in previous episodes, is doing work in private practice. Motivation is one of the things that often people are missing and being able to do the hard work in private practice and one-on-one therapy. People always assume that you have some answer for them. And I say, one of the first things I say when I first sit down with my clients is that I need for you to understand is I am not here to give you the answer. That's you, because the answer is within. I am merely a tool. In fact, I want you to think of me as your mental trainer. Like you have a personal trainer, you go because there's a body type you want to get. You want to tone muscle, lose fat, whatever it is, work on a tough area. You want to get that six pack. That trainer gives you the right exercise and make sure you utilize the right form to achieve that goal. I said, I am the same way when it comes to mental wellness. I am the person that's going to help you make sure you're focusing on the right issues, problems, situations, and really addressing them in a way that can help you to seek whatever it is you want, address your depression, anxiety, or maybe it's just a difficult situation you're in. I don't have the answers. The answers are within. I'm going to help you to uncover them, to discover what it is you're looking for. It's interesting when I usually say that to people. They tend to kind of be a little bit more comfortable in therapy. Like, yeah, you're my mental wellness trainer. Okay, I get that. Never look at it that way. I said most people don't, but that's really what it is. We're not there to give answers. We're there to make sure that you get to the answers because you do the work. So in this episode 57, let's get real about self-motivation. Self-motivation is easier said than done. So many factors, literally, and circumstances play into when we are the best or worst version of ourselves, and how we can actually focus on a task at hand, the goals we have, or even manifesting our dreams. It all comes down to partially self-motivation. Now, mind you, some other things kind of play into this, but the motivation piece is huge when you talk about completing tasks, goals, and manifesting dreams. Self-motivation is what can propel us forward or leave us dead in the water. And understanding the role it plays in your everyday life and long-term goals is part of like this internal mental workings that you have, along with like self-advocacy and emotional intelligence. They work in concert with each other to help you to be able to achieve whether it is a short-term or a long-term goal. But notice, you tend to fall short. You can have the best laid intentions, but if the motivation, the self-motivation isn't there, completing the task, getting to the goal, or manifesting a dream is a hell of a lot harder. And understanding how important it is to check yourself about where you are with your self-motivation, I can't begin to tell you how important it is. So, with me, I love dealing in semantics, so to speak. So what is self-motivation? I'm going to give you a little definition that I picked up from soulsalt.com, one of my favorite sites to go to. When something is like, to me, like perfect, there's no point of trying to reinvent the wheel. So I'm going to share it just the way they give it to you on the site, and I love it. Self-motivation is the ability to drive oneself to take initiative and action to pursue goals and complete tasks. It's your inner drive to take action, so to create and to achieve. It's what pushes you to keep going on tasks, especially those you're pursuing because you want to, not because someone told you to. That, in a nutshell, is self-motivation. And I loved it from soulsalt.com. And I said, I am not going to reinvent the wheel from this. I'm going to share it the way you said it and tell you where to get it. It's one of the articles that's going to be as part of my podcast resource for this particular episode, because I used a lot of what they talked about in the article because it resonated with me. I said, this is exactly what people need to understand about motivation. So we talked about what self-motivation is. But where can you tap into motivation? Because we're talking about the intangibles, the things you can't see, touch, or feel. So, it's like I'm asking you to reach deep and to pull something out, but it's like, but that's so metaphorical. So how do I actually tap in to self-motivation? Think about it like self-motivation, AKA understanding the source is sort of like what's driving you. So it's no different than you get in the car to get to a destination. Well, to be honest, motivation is that vehicle that can help you to get to the destination, which may be a task, goal, or a dream. So look at it as a vehicle that you are navigating. But what's interesting is what type of vehicle you're driving, as well as what types of different, maybe let's say, types of benefits, or what type of cool toys do you have in your car. Let's be honest, a Tesla is going to be different than a Ford, but they can both get you there. But how a Tesla might get you there and being fuel efficient and teaching you to make sure, like, hey, you've got 100-mile trip, and to make sure this electricity in this car goes the full way, you got to make sure that you're not doing this and this, how long the air condition can be on, radio, anything that's draining from the battery. It tells you pretty much how long you have to enjoy certain things. But more importantly, it'll tell you, but if you want to stay in comfort, the nearest charging station is at this exit. That's a hell of a car. Now, self-motivation is usually not that well cut out for you, but you can train yourself to know things better and to understand how to use it. And it can kind of be similar to like a mental Tesla, so to speak. So motivation, interesting enough, and I said the source of it can be intrinsic and extrinsic, which meaning, obviously, to keep it pretty much to the point, one's internal and one is external. So if we're talking about intrinsic motivation, it refers to pursuing a goal based on internal factors, like those key buzzwords we hear, like about passion and purpose. Those are what we would focus on internal drives. Your passion for something is why you pursue it so heavily. Or your purpose tells you, I am meant to be a person to help others. So hence I volunteer, because for me, I feel my purpose is I have something I can share, or I can motivate others to do well as like I want to. So passion and purpose are internal drivers, so intrinsic. Then on the other side, you have what can be referred to as extrinsic, which makes sense if you think about what intrinsic is. Extrinsic should make sense. It refers to your ability to relate to actions that you pursue based on external factors, which means you may be driven by attaining some kind of reward, such as money, status, or good performance. So it's an outside factor that drives you. Be honest. People often will take a job not because they love it, but money as the extrinsic factor that makes them do it. What's interesting though, how many of those people later in life are not enjoying their job anymore because pretty much the money, they've attained something and it just doesn't have the same feel and it feels empty. So why we choose to do things is always extremely interesting. What drives you? I guarantee you, and I will tell you this, what drives us at different points in our lives have different value. Early in life, you may be very extrinsic, in what you pursue. And as you mature and grow and get passion and purpose, it may take a shift more internally. So I want to say there is no right or wrong. If you're working more from an external factor, it is what it is. It's important that you understand, though, where your point of origin from your motivation, where does it come from? Is it from within or is it from without? And are you okay with that? Okay. With that being said, let's do our first real talk time moment of the show. I want you to think, as we're talking about this, of when you've been successful. What motivated you? Was it something that meant something to you personally? Was there a sense of fulfillment? Was it a passion or purpose? Or was it about money, power, position, comfortability? Think about those moments when you can really say, I felt the most focused and motivated at this point of my life. And here's what was going on. I was pushed by the money. I wanted to be promoted because I wanted the ability to have power to do this. And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. What we're looking to do is to have you to pinpoint when you could say, this is where I really was self-motivated. And, hey, it was more external than it was internal for me at that time. But I'm at a different juncture in my life. But you have to understand what motivated you, and it doesn't mean it's going to be the same today. So I want people to think about, as we kind of unfold this conversation, what were the things that truly motivated you to work hard at something? And what was the motive behind it? And when you start to think about these kind of things, I think sometimes people want to guilt themselves like, okay, I did it for money. Look, we need money. There's a reason why we need it. So don't beat yourself up if you did something because you wanted money to buy things that you wanted. Okay, if that's what drove you and that brought you happiness at that time, then that's perfectly appropriate for that moment in time. The question is, where are you now? And does the same thing fulfill you the same way? So what drives you and why becomes the question and reflection of when you were the most successful and motivated. and why you were driven. Was it purple and passion, not related to extrinsic factors or internal factors? But the primary reason is what I want you to work at, why you were seeking to achieve things. And like I said, there's no right or wrong answer. So I don't want you to guilt yourself into an answer, but I want to pinpoint when you were successful and when you were the most motivated, what was the reason why? Because that becomes a point of origin for us to determine as we move through the conversation and you self-evaluate, like, okay, at one point this really was my focus, but it's different now. And then you can start to ask the whys. Why is it different now versus when it was then? And we grow and we mature. So our needs and our wants shift over time. And there's nothing wrong with that, especially if you're willing to get out your comfort zone. So real talk, I really want you to reflect on when you were the most successful and motivated. Why was that? What was the thing that pushed you forward with that? So with that, let's jump in and have a toolbox moment, because, I think it's important as we have these conversations and you start to do the work and start to say, hey, something, maybe I need to do a little bit more work with this, dig deeper, because, this self-motivation thing's got me reflected on. Maybe this is why I'm stuck, because I don't know where my source of motivation comes from anymore. I've been so successful. I don't know what's next. I'm retired. What comes after this? I've had all this success, and now I have a whole other life that's not predicated on my work, which has defined me. So what do I do? It's interesting. So what we're going to pull in our toolbox for this episode is introspection. It's when you examine or observe your own mental and emotional processes, because this is the work you do when you're talking about trying to tap into self-motivation. If somehow it's gone MIA on you and you're feeling stuck or lost and you're like, I kind of don't know what's next. Well, one, why don't you know what's next? But two, what do you feel motivated to do? And if you say nothing, then there's a lot there to uncover why that is. So part of the introspection tool, when you're using it, here's what I want you to focus on. One, this is called you got to do the work. Everything within my episodes are about doing the work. So when you're doing the work, the first thing you're going to do is, one, identify, like I just said before, when you've been successful and what motivated you then. Reflect, be honest. Even if you don't like what you find, you still need to know why you did it. Two, what was your motivation behind it? Again, I was successful at this. I worked so hard and I was motivated because of this. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. Do not criticize yourself if you don't like why you did something. It still was your motivator. And then I want you to think about, how did you process the success? Once you look at this, it's like, was it positive for you? Was it negative? And if so, negative, why? If positive, why? Because if it was positive, then you may be seeking other things within that same vein as you're looking for something to feel more motivated. Was it fulfilling for you? Did you feel accomplished? And if you did, then there's a reason why you could tap into that self-motivation. And that's what I want you to think about. And a lot of people sometimes will struggle with that because we often don't stop and smell the roses. We often don't stop and celebrate our successes. We just move on to the next thing. And this is why I think it's so easy for self-motivation to get lost in the process, because we don't stop. We always think success is marked by large accomplishments, when I always say it's quantitative. It's the things that add up to the big things. Like they say, it's the little things that build a foundation. And success is the same way. So if you could look at the things throughout your life that motivated you, why? And if it was money because that's something that you wanted, then that's good. If it was success within your job because that's something that was a big part of your core values and it made you feel good about yourself, so be it. Remember, within this conversation about self-motivation, your core values are right there in that toolbox, along with emotional intelligence. These are all things you're using together. So reflect on your successes. Be introspective, examine and observe your own mental and emotional processes when you were successful. What was the driving factor for it? Was it more outside? Did you achieve things because you felt others had expectations of you to do so? Was it really your passion and your purpose, or was it somebody else's? A lot of people go through life living somebody else's dream because it was driven into them so early. And then they get in a point in life and they're like, I just don't want this anymore. It's okay, because now you're more focused on your internal drives, that intrinsic factors. And it's never too late to tap into that, because you are the source of everything that is good for you. And most people fail to understand that happiness does not always come from the outside. It often generates with the inside. in concert with what happens on the outside. So that's what introspection, that's the tool I want you to do. We're going to do the work with this, which means you have to identify when you've been successful. You have to look at what motivated you to want that success, to get that success, and how did that process unfold? Was it internal or external for you? Introspection, that's our tool for this particular episode of the show. So let's take a break. And when we come back from the break, let's expand the conversation to address levels of motivation and the 3 Ps of motivation and the danger zones, like things to keep in mind as you're doing this work, because a lot of people feel stuck and they don't know how to get out of a rut. But it's all about how you are introspective about what is going on with you. We're going to dive into that after this break. This is episode 57 of M.A.Y.A. Let's get real about self-motivation. I'll be back right after this break.
Please stop and listen, because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today, because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
I can't breathe. I have migraines, numbness, weight loss. I live with it every day. The illness that I'm suffering from is an anxiety disorder, and it deserves to be treated like any other illness. But it's not.
You may not realize it, but these words, often used to describe someone with a mental health condition, can be very harmful. In a country where 1 in 5 people are affected by a mental health condition, it's time for all of us to step up and change the conversation. Just because someone's struggle isn't obvious on the outside doesn't mean they aren't hurting on the inside. We need to see the person, not the condition. Join with me, pledge to be stigma-free.
Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
That's the goal, to be inspired and motivated. Welcome back to M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 57. Let's get real about self-motivation. It's the thing that so many people I find is missing in their mental wellness journey. Understanding the tools that you really must begin to understand. We don't always master them, but we can have a good control and command of them. And self-motivation is something that you need to have a good command of, because when you get out of sorts or you get off task or goals don't happen the way you want, or you're feeling lost and you're not manifesting your dreams, you have to stop and ask why. You are the source of all these things. And when your motivation is not in the right place, then it's going to be hard to accomplish those things. That's just real talk about self-motivation. So before the break, I said we're going to jump into some wrap-up conversation. And there's levels to self-motivation. There's levels to everything. Level up. Well, level up your self-motivation, real talk. The long-term goal versus the short-term goal. This is where self-motivation can be a slippery slope, so to speak. When setting out to achieve a long-term goal, whether it's to get healthy, make a midlife career change, or realize a personal dream, the beginning is usually easy. You're full of, interest and vitality and determination to face the challenge, like you're spot on. And if you achieve some things throughout it, if it's a shorter goal, because of the level of energy you start, you tend to be able to accomplish it. It's the long-term goals that really tend to take us off our path because they require more time, attention, and patience. So many of us, with most of our most important goals, when they don't happen quickly, or it takes too much hard work or persistence or discipline to change our lives, we often lose our focus where our motivation should be. So the results don't come as quickly as we expect them to be, and nothing goes the way, because that can be naturally frustrating. And we tend to get off task or just walk away because of the extra added focus and persistence that something may have when it's a long term goal. This is why being able to create short term goals that can build to your long term goals so you can see the fruit of your emotional and mental labors. And those successes can help you to really be able to hit the benchmark with longer term goals. And this is why how you approach it is really important. So, let's move for the break. So, let's do it. Let's get familiar with the 3 P's: perspective, passion, and patience. So, you know me, I like to be so literal. And if you Google the definition of perspective, well, it's pretty straightforward. It's the particular attitude towards or way of regarding something as a point of view. So, your total outlook on what it is you're setting to achieve is what's going to motivate you. If you're like, I'm focused on this, I want to get this done, this matters to me, this is important. If your attitude is, this is something of importance, this is something I want to accomplish, then chances are you're going to invest heavily and be motivated. But let's be honest, the less important something is to us, the less likely we tend to really put the effort into it that we should. So perspective is everything. When you put effort into something and motivation, it should have some form of importance to you. And I'll be honest, there's even levels to importance. The level of importance with one task may not be the same. College is a prime example of something that people can struggle with when it comes to self-motivation. You start out your freshman year and you're absolutely excited, and some people make it past that year. Some people don't, because of the amount of work, expectation that they were not prepared for, because nothing in their life looked or felt the way it was being in college. First time independence, all kind of new challenges and obstacles, and where you're at mentally and emotionally matters if you can make it past that first year. And let's be honest, most seniors will tell you by the time they're about to hit the finish line, they're flat out tired. Think about when you were in college, how by the time you got to senior year, you were just gassed emotionally and mentally. Like, you're like, look, even some of your focus in class just wasn't there. You're like, I just got to get through this so I can walk across that stage and get that piece of paper, and move on to that next portion of my life. And if there happens to be more education involved, then you got to rethink your focus on it. Because some particular career tracks, like let's say attorneys and doctors and things of that nature, take more time in schooling. So you got to have the right mindset, and you have to have a certain level of motivation to be able to approach that in a healthy way. So your perspective is everything, because how you start generally may not be how you finish if you're not being aware of how you feel emotionally and mentally. Remember, that introspection piece is important. Passion, a strong and powerful emotion. I can't even begin to tell you. We sometimes overuse the word passion. We really do. But it is important to have a certain level of passion about something, to feel strongly about it, can have conviction. Let's be honest. Are you not probably the most successful at things that you had a strong drive and emotion for? Like, you really wanted to accomplish it. It meant something to you. So whenever passion's involved, self-motivation tends to come a little easily. But if passion waxes and wanes, well, then it could make it a bit more challenging. And this is where you got to check yourself with your motivation, because passion, it's hard to stay intense all the time. And people who are intense all the time sometimes eventually burn out because they're like, whoa, Jesus, I've been on 10 for a while. And when they crash, it's hard. So you got to really make sure you look at your passion, but do it with balance so you don't burn yourself out when it comes to your motivation. It's all right to be gun-ho, but if it's a long-term goal, you have to find a way to moderate your passion so that it doesn't lose its momentum because it's taking longer to achieve a goal or complete a task or manifest that dream. And then there's patience. Oh my, oh my. This is something that over time gets better with most of us. So patience is that capacity to accept or tolerate delay, trouble, suffering without getting angry or upset. Patience is something to me that we learn and grow over time. Let's be honest. When you're an infant, you have no patience. You want everything now because you don't know anything about emotional regulation. You have no emotional intelligence. As we grow and mature and have more experiences, we learn how to regulate our emotions. Most of us, some people don't, and have better emotional intelligence. This is why I always push EI all over you, because the higher you have of emotional intelligence, being able to perceive, evaluate, and control your emotions to understand what can trigger you and what can kind of take you off your task. So then you respond to things versus reacting makes a difference, even people. And then you also can learn to understand others. So say something is an uphill battle. And let's just say you have a supervisor that no matter what you do, you just can't seem to get it right. You're like, I don't care what I do, it's never right. That's discouraging. And without patience, it would be so easy just to give up. But when you have to begin to understand someone else's emotions, you say to yourself, okay, let me think about this. Is there something about me that's creating this within our interactions? Is it maybe their management style that I'm not understanding? When you have patience, you'll take time to begin to peel back the layers of things to get to the core of what's going on. And patience is something we learn through time and experience. It's trial and error. The more mistakes you make, often the greater your patience can grow. Because I always tell people, get past the fact that you made a mistake and ask yourself, why did I make the mistake and what can I learn from it so that I don't repeat it, but I can understand how to do something better in my next attempt. It's a learning curve. Mistakes are part of the learning curve. And if you have patience and you don't rush to try to figure something out, then you honestly can get a better outcome, especially if you have to navigate others and not just yourself. Patience becomes paramount. So those are the 3 P's: perspective, passion, and patience. 3 things, if we were going to have a second toolbox moment, that you should be putting into your toolbox. All right. So I haven't said this in a while, but I thought it was really important to add it to the mix. Beware and be aware. The danger zone. Having no sense of direction and lacking perspective, purpose, or passion and patience can be a dangerous thing when you talk about trying to either jumpstart your self-motivation or kind of rev it up, maintain it. Because motivation is something that does require maintenance. You got to check in on occasion, like, hey, I've been really successful. I've gotten kind of laxed. Okay, but where am I with that? Am I okay with that? Or do I feel like I've kind of lost a little bit of that passion that I had? If I did, okay, has it shifted to something else, and why? It's asking those questions because we all have emotional and mental shifts throughout our lives. The question is, what do you do with it when you all of a sudden lose passion for something? And people get really like worked up, like, oh, I used to be so passionate about this, and now it just doesn't do anything for me. Okay, well, why? Maybe a part of you has matured and changed, and your life isn't the same as when you had the same passion. Think about it. Often how people are before they have children or get married, and then they do all those things. And then there's a shift later when they're either an empty nester and it's just them and their spouse, or maybe you get divorced and people are like, I'm kind of lost. I used to be so passionate about these things, but now I'm not. Well, I would say in that transition and in those experiences that you had, what impacted you and what maybe has changed? Just because a passion leaves doesn't mean that new passion cannot be found. And that's why you have to beware and be aware of having no sense of direction, and you start feeling lost for not exploring why that is. And this gets into the conversation about the emotional void. And this is something, it's kind of like, it's a motivational void, it's an emotional void. This is kind of like a M.A.Y.A-ism, so to speak. I kind of created the motivational void. What does that mean? Well, it honestly is that danger zone area that you sense no direction in what you're doing. You lack perspective and purpose and passion and patience, and you feel stuck or just like dead in the water. That's the motivational void. And here's the thing, believe it or not, we all get there at some point of our lives. Everything is not always an uptake. There's going to be times where you just have that emotional and mental shift because life happens, and you'll feel like, I kind of feel lost. Like I don't feel like I even know myself anymore. And you have to stop and ask yourself, why is that? Why have I come to a place where I feel disconnected from myself? What have I been disconnected from that had so much value to me that it apparently is missing and I don't even know what it is? Think about that. If you feel emotionally and mentally disconnected from yourself and you don't know why, I would then ask you, well, how well did you know yourself to be so disconnected? Generally speaking, when you take the time to get to know yourself, you'll know when something makes you a little disconnected or disjointed, so to speak. But a lot of times, especially early decisions in life, don't resonate with who we are later. But to be honest, those were kind of just like putty early developments. And a lot of people didn't do the hard work of getting to know themselves. What did Aristotle say? Knowledge of self is the beginning of all wisdom. Well, let's be honest. This is kind of newer age thinking in regards to let's get in touch with ourselves. Let's, kind of connect with that inner being and let's have self-talk. And hey, self-advocacy is important. I mean, this is a big shift in thinking with individual development that didn't exist 30 or 40 years ago. When it was like, oh, you're so being like hippie. And then you were probably having an LSD trip or something. People would say crazy. But no, really, when people were free thinking like that, they were looked at as being, kind of different, that mindset wasn't embraced. But now here we are all these years later, and people are embracing the idea of getting in touch with their inner self, their inner child, and letting it breathe and opening it up and saying, okay, I kind of did always have an interest in that, but I put that in the back seat because it really wasn't all that acceptable, or it wasn't popular, or I was afraid to take the risk because it was something on the unknown. So a lot of times we get into that motivational void because we feel like we're missing passion, purpose, patience and perspective on why we feel we don't have motivation, and then we don't know why. That's the void. So if you find yourself in that void, here's what you have to think about. The answer is within you. You just have to do the work to figure it out. Here's the thing. It may be simple, or it might be a complex situation that is layered literally with conflict, challenge, in some cases, trauma. Something is blocking your ability to thrive emotionally, mentally, physically, financially, even spiritually. And you have to stop and be able to say, I stand in this emotional void. So let me do the work. Let me do this introspection that M.A.Y.A mentioned. Oh, and this would be a great time to get a therapist or a counselor to really help you to pull back those layers and challenge you in some ways. Part of therapy is about challenging. It is all about comfort. If you're sitting in your therapy session and it's making you super comfortable, it's great that you're connecting with your therapist. But the hard work is I might have to nudge you gently to say, we got to explore something right here. You said something that kind of made me think about something. I want to make sure I heard what you said. So you reflect back and say, can we talk about that? Tell me more about what that means, because I want to understand this. And sometimes when you do that, a person will go, I don't know, but yeah, that is what I meant. Well, let's explore it. And that's the part about therapy that's unique, is that it helps to kind of take that conversation deeper that you really can't have with yourself. And maybe you don't want to have it with a friend or a family member. I get so many people who come into therapy simply because they said, these are some things I want to work on, but I don't want to do it with my family and friends. I want the privacy and the space to do it without judgment or criticism. And it's not to say that I think that they don't care for me, but sometimes people are judgmental and they just don't get where you're coming from. But there's some things I'm really struggling with, and I just don't want to have to deal with the extra emotional burden or feeling judged or not accepted for what my struggle is. That is the beauty of therapy. It's somebody who absolutely is going to give you unconditional positive regard and not judge you on what you're struggling with. It's like you have a captivated audience of one that is very interested in helping you to navigate what you're struggling with. You can't beat that. So that's why I want people to rethink the idea of therapy and let the stigma go. No, it's not a shrink, and no, there's something wrong with you if you check in with people. I'm finding people now who say, I haven't talked to someone in like about 6 months or so. I see this person, they're not available, so I'm looking for a new person. And sometimes every couple months, I just want to do a check-in, because just kind of do my mental check-in and see how I'm doing. That's fantastic. It doesn't mean something's wrong. Sometimes maybe something's on their mind, but what's key? They're giving the time and the energy to their mental wellness before it gets overwhelming. And that's a hard lesson to learn. I always say people don't want to dip their toe into mental wellness, but I said it earlier, and they get pushed full-fledged in and they're neck deep in water. And God forbid if you can't swim. So you're drowning in emotion. You're drowning in all these thoughts. Maybe you're financially just in this place you can't navigate. And now you're overwhelmed and you're falling apart. Now, don't get me wrong. What I'm not saying is that therapy is the answer. But if you come to understand yourself better, how you will navigate troubled waters or deep waters looks a lot different than when you're not connected to self. It doesn't mean that you don't have setbacks, obstacles, that sometimes you just don't feel good enough. Sometimes you just think the world sucks because guess what? It's coming at you like 90 miles an hour and you can see it in your rear view mirror and you're like, it's about to overtake me. Okay, but what does this mean? How might this affect me? What tools do I have to help me navigate what seems like I'm about to have I'm about to be rear-ended with life, which might give me a head-on collision with where I'm at presently or my future. It's about preparing yourself for difficulty. Does it mean that difficulty won't happen? No. But how you prepare yourself, how motivated you are to prepare yourself is the thing that makes the difference in us all. And that's why I want to normalize the conversation about mental wellness. Just like you go to a checkup for your doctor to make sure you know your annual checkup for your blood pressure or whatever, diabetes, or just that you're doing okay. Why does mental wellness have to be any different? Why can't you just do a check-in? So I give people those resources like, hey, get a therapist, do a mental check-in, especially it's been rough times the last year and a half. Let's be honest. Most of us, if we're working and have like traditional employer health plans, have what's called employee assistance programs, EAPs. They generally have counseling for all kinds of things: grief, finances, depression, anxiety, a whole list of things that people are struggling with. They have people that can give you advice, and most employee assistance programs gives you up to roughly maybe 5 or 6 sessions. And after you meet with those person in those sessions, they'll say, okay, I feel like we had some resolution with this. How do you feel? And you'll say, okay, this actually was helpful. I used some of the things you said, or this direction or this advice you gave me about a financial thing has really helped me to kind of navigate a difficult situation. I'm feeling good. Or if they feel like whatever the issue was not resolved within those short amount of sessions, then they'll make a recommendation for you to do more work with someone else. But it's this easy way to do something without it being so overwhelming. Now, mind you, everyone doesn't have an employee assistance program, which means you might just have to seek and find a therapist. I'm going to tell you something. If you don't have an EAP program, it's pretty simple. Turn over the back of your insurance card, call your customer service number, and tell them that you're looking for a mental health provider that's in your plan. And pretty much they're going to give you a list of how to call someone. It's that simple. And if you're someone who doesn't have any insurance, because I think I can't leave that out the conversation, then now mind you, I'm speaking from an Illinois standpoint, so I can't speak that every single state is the same, but I found the structure as I've done the research that it is. Pretty much every county has a health department, and within your health department is a behavioral health, it may be called, or mental health, unit or department. So they always see individuals that don't have insurance. And if you don't, they often can attempt to help you to start getting signed up for insurance. But in the meantime, they can link you to the resources that you need to be able to talk to someone. So no matter what your situation is, insured or not insured, there's no reason to not deal and take care of your mental wellness so that you can avoid being in the motivational void. And, and I'll be honest, sometimes the motivational void is the emotional void. People feel unaccomplished or they don't feel anything anymore. I've had people say that to me. I just don't feel. I'm just not motivated. I just don't care. And it's like, well, how did you arrive to this point of I don't care, I'm not interested? What led up to this? And this is what we do in therapy. We pretty much reverse engineer how you got to where you are. And I'll be honest, believe it or not, we usually can get the source of what the issue is with most people. But you got to be willing to do the work. And when I find people don't want to do it, when I look at people who just kind of give me this lackluster, like, oh, I just don't know. I said, I kind of feel like you do know, you just don't want to do the work. We're here for you. So if you're not going to be willing to pull back the layers and really address why you have no motivation to do anything or where you're feeling disconnected from yourself, okay, why? Do you ever feel like you knew who you were, or were you embedded in roles? Remember last week's show was about understanding how different roles in your life impact you? And a lot of times when people have many roles and then they get streamed down, or the need or responsibility for one role is not the same, they get lost because they don't know who they really are anymore, because they were always a wife or a mother or the matriarch of a family or something of that nature. You know what I mean? So it's important to understand those things. I would encourage you to go back and listen to episode 56. I think it was really beneficial in the things that I shared. So the emotional void, remember, the answer is within you. You just have to do the work to figure it out. Like I said, it could be a simple answer or it might be complex, and it's going to be layered. So it could be conflict, challenges, and trauma. Something could be blocking your ability to thrive emotionally, mentally, physically, financial, and even spiritually. But if you're not willing to do the work to pull back the layers, to really investigate what's going on, like, where did my motivation go? Why do I have these voids? Then you'll continue to have the exact same result you have, which is probably a life that feels unfulfilled. And to me, every life is worth too much and it's too precious not to get every single drop of potential happiness and success that you should have. But you have to feel that way. So, some final thoughts. Okay. Ask yourself as you're on this journey, where am I at in my life? And where am I going? Now, if you can't answer these questions, and I just kind of mentioned, then reverse engineer it. So instead ask, where have I been? And pay close attention to what has driven, or AKA, motivated your choices that you have made in life, as well as outcomes that have been successful or maybe not successful. And then I want you to think about that intrinsic and extrinsic, factors we talked about. Has your motivation been more internal in nature, or have you always been driven by more external things? And the answer always lies within you. And this is what people often, I think, are afraid of. It's within you. You just have to actually want to discover it. And self-discovery is an amazing thing. And that's what M.A.Y.A is all about, folks. Getting to that best version of you, harness that happiness you seek in your life every day. And happiness doesn't mean sunshine and rainbow. Sometimes it's just absolutely simple and it may feel a little mundane, but there's no trouble, there's no worry. It's just a pleasant day, and there's nothing wrong with that. All right, everybody, this has been episode 57. Let's get real about self-motivation. Felt kind of real for me. Hopefully it was real for you too. So thank you for listening and tuning in. I appreciate all the support when people tune into the episodes. Like I said, the whole purpose of this podcast is to help you to identify your ambition and harness that motivation to help you to acquire the success and satisfaction you seek in your everyday life. Remember, of course, episodes of M.A.Y.A can be found on so many podcast platforms. I mean, you can find episodes on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google, iHeartRadio, Amazon's Audibles, on Spotify. Pretty much, if you have a podcast platform of choice, I'm probably there. Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. I will tell people sometimes you got to do the whole M.A.Y. and boom, because there's other M.A.Y.As in the world, allegedly. I didn't really realize that until I started podcasting. I'm like, what? I'm not the only M.A.Y.A in the world. That's a joke. But sort of doing what I do. So you may have to search it that way, and then you should find me. But I would tell you, if you want to do it the easy way, then you can listen to episodes of M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, at myakai.com. It's just that simple. Now, remember, with every episode, there's a podcast resource. So just click on, once you go to the site, click on the podcast resource tab, just scroll right down there to episode 57. There's a couple extra things that I have added that I feel will get some additional kind of depth and breadth to the conversation. If you happen to be a YouTuber, subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find all the episodes there as well. Like I said, just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and you can find everything M.A.Y.A, whether it's myakai.com, YouTube. Every episode I've done pretty much is there. It's straightforward and easy to find. As you know, as I end every show, I have something I like to share, and I say, until next time, everyone, remember, your present becomes your past, and your future is no more. So make the most of every single day. With that saying, be well. Always, always, always stay safe. But more importantly, this part to me is one of the most things I think is the most important. Continue to be you, which in my eyes is nothing short than being absolutely amazing. Thank you for tuning in to episode 57 of Maya. Let's get real about self-motivation. And you know what? I never know how this is going to shake out because everything is moving and shaking for me. But there will be an episode 58 for next week. I don't know what it is yet, but hopefully you'll tune in and listen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Ciao.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A and the M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking, thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A at M.A.Y.A Akai.com.